If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.
I heard a quote a while ago that really resonates with me still to this day. It's like, vulnerability creates credibility. So in a sense, if somebody sees you in that state and sees that you have gone through that and it's still affecting you in some way, energetically, emotionally, and you can bring up a story, absolutely, all of a sudden you have this like connection, a point of connection with them that you perhaps didn't have before.
Don't Hide the Scars, a weekly podcast focused on addiction and recovery. Created by the nonprofit Pain, Parents and Addicts in Need, and founded by Flindt and Andersen.
Welcoming to the Don't Hide the Scars podcast, Matt Gardiner. Thank you for joining founder of Pain, Flindt Andersen himself, and myself, and all these selves, Jason LaChance.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on. Really excited for this one. And yeah, all the selves, here we are.
Here we are.
Yes.
As long as we're not self-serving.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Or, we don't even need to get into isms yet.
No.
Right?
No.
Of course, Matt's doing some amazing work. Beyond Recovery podcast, Flindt, you were recently on an amazing episode. We've heard some really great things. And of course, Recovery Roadmap, the work you're doing with your coaching, which we're going to get into, because transparency, I've been in one of Matt's groups recently, and I'm getting so much out of it. Not only the amazing people, but the work we've done one-on-one that I was telling Flindt about, just reframing how I see myself through the story work as like, I paid therapists $100 a session, and Matt, within 90 minutes, I got more out of it than 6 months.
Right?
So
Exactly.
Great to hear, man.
Because most therapists don't know this stuff. I hate to say it, but therapists in general, I mean, how does and again, God bless therapy, right?
Yeah.
But when you have a therapist that is not an addict, or not in recovery, they can give you the book version real well. But to understand that deep, dark, where our minds go with this, I'm sorry. I'd rather work with guys that are in recovery, to be honest with you. Yeah. And without all the letters behind our names. Right.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you, Flindt. I agree with both you guys. First off, yeah, Jason, you're doing a wonderful job in there. Like, just really, I'm here to help guide and such, but like, you're ready for it. You were ready for it. It was like, watering a plant, essentially. You really took to it. So I'm really proud of you and the work that you've been doing, first off. So, reciprocate or reflect that back to you. And yeah, no, Flindt, I completely agree with you. Like, I had been doing counseling for, on and off for a better part of 10 years. And It is great to let off some steam and such, but like, the experiential learning and ups and downs that I've had through my own addictive patterns and such is just like, I can speak very well to that. That's essentially been my whole adult life from the time I'm 16 to 37, right? And a few little blips in the radar where I was able to get out of it for a bit, but decided to come back and try moderation. Didn't really work for me. It didn't work at all, right? No. And now here I am. So yeah, absolutely, there is something about that. And then I think there's I wonder what you guys think about it, but like, when you're in a room, or even when you're just having a conversation over Zoom with somebody that has also been through recovery, the need for a persona or ego just drops away.
It does.
It's just like, when you're talking with recovery folks, it's just like instant. You have this connection. And I would think that would be something to do with what you're talking about, Flindt, where you don't necessarily get that with a counselor if they don't have that experience themselves, right?
Correct. Absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you. I think I mentioned this on one of the podcasts previously. When I was in my addiction, my wife and I went to a therapist, and and this therapist said, not only should you guys not be married, you shouldn't even be friends. Okay. Yeah, right.
What?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. Right. Well, again, 43 years later, dude, we got you. He did
it on purpose because he knew you loved challenges.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, reverse psychology is used.
Right.
Yeah.
Hell,
oh man. Yeah.
But for me, and we've talked about it here, Matt. You and I've talked about it. The opposite of addiction isn't sobriety; it's connectivity. Yeah. And for me, that's the ultimate value that I'm finding. And like you said, that vulnerability. I'm having conversations. We're conversing. We're seeing other people. I don't know how much we're not going to speak on anyone, of course. It's in the group, but it's just a brilliant thing that each day we've got to post something up about that day, things that we're working on, or even what we got out of other people in the group. And the level of vulnerability is beautiful. Like, you'll have someone that's beautiful scenery, but yet they're a little fired up about something and maybe, in that kind of way. And then on the other side of it, they're just like, but I did this with it. And it just helps you reframe a lot of the way you think, you see yourself, your place in the world. And that's the real big value that I've gotten out of it, because I can only come and sit on your couch so much, Flindt.
Yeah, you know what? I'm so proud of everybody in there, and like I'll speak to my experience, because to your point, I'm certainly not going to speak on anybody else's behalf, but right away the group it was very apparent that everybody was going to come in and be vulnerable and share. And in that context, I think there's permission for everybody else to do that, right? It just seemed like a collective desire to just come as you are, speak to the good, the bad, the ugly, or whatever you're experiencing that day. And like you say, there can be some contrast, some duality. And let's face it, that's what life is dualities, right? There's the the challenges with the and the reframing into opportunities, and and just speaking, being aware. It's an awareness exercise, right? When I'm checking in, I had a fairly challenging morning, to be honest with you. And I like getting in there, and I find that this type of work is very peer-to-peer. I don't feel the need to be this like authority figure, like I'm a coach, right. Listen to me. Like in fact, it's the opposite. I prefer if I'm in there with all you guys and gals and saying, making myself vulnerable too. It's like lead by example might be a little bit corny to say, but you get what I mean. Like just getting in there and also doing the same kind of work that you guys are doing. I'm on the same, we're all on the same path, and we're doing it together. And yeah, absolutely, dude. I know that was a big part of the conversation you and I had when I was on knocking doors down about like the opposite of addiction being connection, and this really truly proves it again, doesn't it? The whole community part of the Sober October group. So for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's the basis for what you do with the parent group.
What are you reading my mind now?
Don't get too close to him, eh?
He is right there. Jeez. Well, because
that's why I am the #1 podcast in the Central Valley.
Boom.
Inside joke.
That's an inside joke.
I'll tell you about it.
I love it. it.
But no, that's it. That just blew me away, because I'm sitting here thinking about this, the times in the parent meetings when I can be that hard ass. I can come across as that hard ass because I care, right? And I get angry a lot of the times because I'm dealing with people that just don't quite get it yet. But there are so many times when I sit back and I let that group just go and say and feel and do all of those things. And then it has an effect on me, and it will bring something up in my memory about somebody I harmed or somebody that, anyway, it makes me vulnerable. And then when I speak that vulnerability to that parent group, and again, I don't want people to take this wrong, but it literally makes me or what I have to say more important. If that makes sense, because
totally does.
Because they're seeing that side of me, which again, I don't show very often. Okay. But it does show that side, because you know what? All of us in recovery, we can be idiots. We can be hard asses. We can be all that. But if you're working that recovery program and that vulnerability will come out, that is real. All right. That is real stuff right there. And I think more people, it's one thing to do it in a group of other people that are in recovery, but when you show that vulnerability to people that aren't, man, it just has a great deal of power behind it.
Absolutely. You know, I completely agree with you, Flindt. I heard a quote a while ago that really resonates with me still to this day. It's like vulnerability creates credibility. So in a sense, if somebody sees you in that state and sees that you have gone through that and it's still affecting you in some way, energetically, emotionally, you know, and you can bring up a story, absolutely. All of a sudden you have this like connection, a point of connection with them that you perhaps didn't have before. So, and you know, I love that. I was like, man, that totally makes sense. Vulnerability equals credibility in a lot of ways. So I love that.
I love that line. Yeah.
And there's an it's interesting how it can come back around and tie into, we're going itty words today, your integrity. Because when you start to put that out there and people are aware that you verbalized it, now all of a sudden they're seeing the behavior that's matching that. And, you know, I mean, Flindt, we've talked about it here, Matt. I know you had to go through the process with people of reestablishing your integrity to where they're no longer sitting blowing up your phone when you say you're going to be home at 6 and it's now 6:15. You know, they're just kind of like, oh, well, maybe stuck in traffic or whatever it is. Or you say, you know, Flint's case, I'm going golfing with the guys this week and there's no questions. I say, hey, I'm going to whatever, and there's no question there, like, are you sure? Well, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
But it takes time to build that. Okay. I mean, look, if in the first couple of years of my sobriety, if I was telling my wife I'm going to go play golf with the boys, whoa.
Yes.
But you know, 21 years later, there's not even a doubt in our mind.
Sure.
You know, and that's because, you know, I worked the program.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, for me, it's shown up with the ability to have some boundaries that I simply didn't have before. Right. So before I would be purposely ambiguous with maybe I'll show up, or like, I'll maybe be there. I would always leave it this gray area, right, where I can be I'm confident to say no now, which I was such a people pleaser before that I would always either come up with kind of some BS story about why I can't go. I felt the need. I thought it was polite to come up with, I thought it was polite to lie about why I'm not going to be there, not to hurt feelings, as opposed to just being like, no, that doesn't resonate with me, or like I'm not comfortable going to that house party where there's a bunch of alcohol and drugs or whatever. Right? So that is something that I've practiced now and realizing, and here I am like 40 years old, realizing that it's okay to say no, and there doesn't have to be a no and then a story attached to it. It's like, no. Right. And that's to me, that's part of integrity, is learning that I can have boundaries that are based on, you know, my self-care needs versus me perceiving that I'm like, you know, being polite to this person or not hurting their feelings, which I don't even know. Right. Because it's this like vague, you know, in that gray area, like I say. So, yeah, that's, you know, for sure. Integrity is, something I've had to practice anyways, and be more clear with myself about what that means to me too. Right.
New Perceptions North, the premier drug and alcohol treatment and recovery center in Central California. A full continuum of medically supervised, top-quality care with programs for detox, inpatient residential treatment with dual diagnosis, intensive outpatient treatment, sober living, support groups, and more. With 50-plus years of combined experience and sobriety, Flindt Andersen and Thelma Gatlin Wilson provide adult men and women with the highest caliber of professional health care, treating each client with compassion and respect, and a safe, comfortable environment. To begin the process of recovery, to proudly create and sustain a life without addiction, call 559-978-1507 or visit newperceptionsnorth.com.
Oh God, yeah. How many times you listen to me? I'm really working on my boundaries here. I need to improve that. But how within the coaching, especially one-on-one, and hey, maybe add this to our call coming up.
Yeah, right.
Do you work with people through boundaries? Because I was telling Flindt about the story work we did, where, you know, it's a really interesting exercise that I'm not sure how much, you know, in recovery, because I never did any sort of inpatient or outpatient work. It was right into 12-step group, but you know, the framing of my thoughts and how I see myself. And there's two gentlemen here on that I've been open about that it's an area I struggle with. So how do you kind of approach people when they start to bring up boundaries?
Yeah. So very good question, you know, and it's for me, first of all, let's identify what boundaries are versus other things that potentially would be misconstrued as such. That'd be like conditions. Like for me, if you're being conditional with yourself or somebody else, or you have expectations that are expectations of yourself that you're projecting onto somebody, that's to me, that's the ego, the egoic self coming up. You know what I mean? And it's like, if you do this, then I will, accept you. Or if you do it this way, then I'll definitely hang out with you. But if you do it this different way, then no. So like, if you're egoically projecting on somebody or having these like conditional friendships or relationships, I suggest look at yourself and go, hey, like I think that's from my ego, and that's from a fear-based statement, where boundaries are you protecting the true version of yourself, right? It's beyond the ego. It's you filling your own cup, so to speak, right? Like I love the analogy of, when you're on the plane, they have when the oxygen masks come down, you're going to take care of yourself first before you can help anybody else, right? So that's, to me, that's boundaries is in that vein versus, a conditional, putting a condition on somebody or an expectation, right? So just being clear about that as well, and realizing that like self-care is not selfish, right? Which that was a challenging lesson for me as well. I always thought, well, no, I'm taking care of other people, or I'm worried about other people. It's selfish of me to worry about myself first, when in fact, as soon as you get to the processing, you realize, no, it's entirely the opposite. I want to be 100% of me, so that I can be 100% to my relationships with you guys, so forth, right? So just getting very clear with what a boundary is versus a conditional friendship or an expectation of somebody else, right? So that's where it starts for sure.
Yeah. Was that stuff you struggled with, Flindt?
Well, yeah. Early on.
Okay.
I think all of us struggle with that. Setting boundaries is tough in the early going of one's sobriety. Today, it's just not hard at all. It just isn't. I'm very, very, because again, it's an honesty thing. And if you're not honest with yourself, you can't be honest with somebody else. And so people understand that today, and if they don't, oh, well, see ya, I'm sorry. I mean, you're a good guy, good person, but I don't have to hang with you, and I'm not going to, and it almost goes back to that vulnerability piece that, as you move into kind of the years of sobriety, people are going to respect you. Everybody's going to be leery of you in that first, whatever it is, that first year, 2, 3, 4 years. But man, the longer you are staying sober, the more people are going to respect your boundaries. And like I said, and if they don't, hey, see ya, don't see ya, don't need ya, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and it's interesting to bring that the first 2-3 years, because you see it so much. I've seen it, and I'm sure, Matt, with the work you're doing, is that that desire for newcomers to reclaim so much so quickly.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
And it could be the danger of with the boundary part. I know for me, I was terrible at it. I was absolutely terrible. I continued to create the false connections because of the lack of boundaries. I wasn't being authentic. Thus, the other person couldn't be, or they wouldn't be in general. And if I found now that if they're just not, like you said, you're not a bad person, just this isn't going to work.
This ain't working.
This ain't going to work. We aren't going to be able to jive here. And that's okay.
And you might be able to jive coming back years later.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You might be able to. That doesn't mean a friendship goes away, or let me rephrase that. It can go away for a while, but it's not permanently disabled, right? You can always come back to it.
Sure.
Absolutely. No, 100%. Yeah. There's quite a few friendships, and this comes up a lot. I was fearful of it. It was definitely one of my, that last layer of excuses and justifications why I'm not doing it. One of the major ones that came up for me is like, oh man, then I'm gonna have to get all these new friends, because like everybody drinks, and I'm kind of like the party guy, right? I host all these parties and so forth. Like that whole thing is gonna go away. which isn't true, right? I mean, if people sort of faded and like to your point, Flindt, can't come and go, right? There's some more like intermittent, like I'll see a group of them, you know, a couple times a year versus like every weekend, right? But they're still in my life. There's certainly no ill will. We still love each other. It's just we're on different paths now. And to your point, who knows what to say 5 years from now that those paths reconvene, right? There's, you know, and just being open for that. And again, it's like I'm practicing being unconditional with myself, so I want to be unconditional with those other people as well. Like they are doing their thing, and that's all great. And that's this is the difference between, you know, boundary and conditions. So instead of being conditioned, like, yeah, I'll hang out with you, but you can't drink around me, right? Like that kind of thing. How about it's a boundary. I can't be around drinking, so I'm not going to come to your house party. Like that's the difference, right? It's a little bit of a, like nuanced, but it's you know, that's how I view it anyway. So
Matt, how do you talk to people that are new in recovery? Let's talk about this for a second. This whole, obviously not the drug thing. Let's talk about the drinking thing.
Sure.
Because that is a huge issue among parents, among kids, among everybody. And I can only go back to my own story here, you know, especially with family. We teach and preach that for the first 2 years of your kid's recovery, that you should not have any alcohol in your own house. You should not go to a relative's house for Christmas, Easter, birthdays, whatever it is, if they are going to serve alcohol. Because we all know the dangers of that. And that goes for alcoholics and drug addicts as well.
Yeah.
But there is going to come a time when that's societal. You are going to be thrown into that position no matter where you go, that there is going to be alcohol there. And so in my own case, I know this is going to sound weird, but I have a huge family. Okay. And they drink. There's no alcoholics in the bunch, but they drink. They have a good time. So what I would do is I would bartend. I would go behind the bar. All right. Yeah. And bartend, and then I'd screw with people. Okay. so then I would fake taking a bottle of Jack and pour it in a cup, and believe it or not, all of a sudden I would hear no from 50 different people. Okay. Yes. And I'm going, just kidding, guys. Kind of a thing. Cause they were watching, they were watching tremendous. Me. As much as I was watching them. But again, the point here is that we are all going to get thrown into that situation at some point. It's just inevitable. So what do you tell your people, about that?
Yeah, it's I'll start with just my own experience. I wasn't super open. I wasn't nearly as protective as I should have been. Here's the should have, I hate to say it, but it's part of the story, right? Is the first time I'd sobered up for the first 3 years, I was very protective who I told. So I wasn't I wasn't super open with it. I was still ashamed of my drinking, and I didn't want it to get out and, get it into like the place of where I was employed and so forth. So I kept my cards pretty close to my chest, now realizing that I did that intentionally as well to leave the door open a crack for me to be able to go back out. So that's the big difference between this time where I'm super open about it. I'll tell people, and I've had the odd person go, well, hey, like, what are you being a wuss? Like, you got to drink. But like, that's like 1% of people. Right. That's some guy that's already super hammered up, won't remember it the next day. You just kind of can blow them off or ignore them. Right. And that sort of thing. So yeah, that was the difference. I think it's, again, going back to like honesty, authenticity, and just being brave about like protecting why you're doing that, right? So when you're showing up to a party and if it's going to be around family, being honest with them and and asking and requesting their support, whether it's like keeping it away from you, whatever that looks like. Now, there's not necessarily a blanket statement because, like, man, as you probably both know, like family dynamics can be very complex, right? And there's so much like weight and just backstory behind like so many different family gatherings, right? So there's no set rule per se. I would just get the person to really focus on what the needs of themselves are. Where are they in their sobriety? There's actually one of the people that I'm working with right now that we're yeah, we were talking a lot about redefining here in this episode as well. And that's what it is. So, okay, when you're in that family setting, that's when the drinks are going. That's when you're really uncomfortable. Okay, how about redefine your relationship with your parents? So she's been doing like a one-on-one with her mom, like just doing like some walks in the evening, has like a set day just to hang out with her dad, right? So this kind of divide and conquer, if you will, like having set isolated times that remove her from this like family dynamic where it's super troubling for her and can be quite triggering. And then that way it's just like, okay, I'm comfortable in these pockets of time with one-on-ones and there's less pressure for me. So that's what it is. It's about like redefining your relationship with your family or with your friends too, right? There is nothing wrong with taking 6 months, a year. There was a group of people I just stopped going out with for like whatever it was, the first 6 months, right? 8 months. Luckily, it coincided with, a pandemic. So it was pretty easy to go into hiding. So that worked out very well for me that way. I mean, regardless, I would have either way, but I was like, oh, that worked out okay in that sense, right? So yeah, that's it too, is just realizing that honesty, you got to be honest. You got to be clear and comfortable speaking what your needs are and requesting them. Yep. And if they aren't met, get out of there, get yourself to safety. There's like, it's a short-term thing. And remember, just to circle back to what we were talking about, Flindt, was like family with friends, there might be a little bit of a detour. You might be apart for a little bit, but there's always that chance to come back into each other's lives later on. It's not a forever thing, right? So don't have that pressure language on yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. I had a situation of a family reunion thing recently over the summer, and one particular member of the family started to get a little bit belligerent, and I checked out of the group that was there because they were starting to throw daggers, especially at my mom, which is a big no-no. And she just gave me the look. But my uncle, who's been sober for 26 years now, my cousin that I'm closest to, and my mom knew that if anything like that, I was out. Anyone else wasn't going to get an explanation. I just looked at my mom and just, me and the missus walked away. Yeah. Boom. And that's just how it is, because
that's how it is.
Yeah. Perfect, if you guys want to sit and listen to this bull, go ahead. Right. But I'm out. Right.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Perfect, man. That's that. And yeah, I'm sure you're all the better for it. Right. It's like, I'm sure it takes a lot of that weight off you. Right.
Well, and I used to think this, because there were a couple of times, not many, but there were a couple of times when I'd find myself in that situation. But the line that I always had in my head was, I've already been to hell and I'm not going back. So you can kiss my ass. Okay.
Yeah.
That's simple, because that person that's giving me grief or giving you grief, or, they're not going to take that journey to hell with me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So see ya. Again, there's those two words. See ya.
See ya.
It's that simple.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I think there's two people that come to mind in whatever it's been, like the combined 7 years ish of my alcohol free. There's only been 2 times where somebody's really given it to me. Mm-hmm. And one of them was like my really good friend, and it was in front of everybody. He's kind of, dude, Matty, what are you doing drinking water? What the fuck is that? He's just going off, and, and he just, I get the impression, he's a younger guy, right? So I kind of got the impression he's like, it's a projection, right? He's feeling uncomfortable about himself. And then the other time was just some dude. It was like the bass player in my band, his neighbor, and I'd never met this guy. I was like, I don't have to listen to you. You're just some fucking guy. Like, and I just bailed. I'm like, well, you just gotta. He's like trying to call me out on my manhood and stuff. I'm like, fuck, see you guys later. Like, so that's what it is.
So I got your manhood.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah, kiss my sober ass on the way out.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
That's interesting too. I never thought of it that way. Is it the projection element of it?
Yeah,
I really hadn't, until you said that. I'm like, man, I've had some people like, oh, you're too good to come hang out with us or whatever it is. And it's still people that there was some excuses. They stopped asking. So there is no more excuses because they stopped asking, but I never thought of it that way. Of the projection element,
for sure, yeah.
Or you could always say, if somebody says, "Well, you too good to hang out with me," say, "Fuck yeah, I am."
Yeah, sure. Why not? They're baiting.
Why not? They're baiting you. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
So come right back at them. Hey, Again, we're not perfect.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly, right.
It's spiritual progress, not spiritual perfection.
That's right.
Yes, progress.
And we can apologize for that later.
All right.
You know?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, a little easier to apologize for that than some of the other things I'm sure we've all done.
Right?
That's step 4. Oh,
yeah. Oh my.
That's step
my
4.
favorite.
Right. Let's go ahead and let's get the list out here. Start writing again.
Yeah.
Oh,
right. Just made the list.
You made the list.
Yeah, like a list of Jericho, but different. Yeah.
So being in the podcast realm, much like us, the Beyond Recovery podcast, of course, Flindt a guest on there.
God, that
so
was
many.
Great. I had such a great time with you that day, Matt. That was just really fun.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, that was absolute great interview. And yeah, I'm happy to hear there's some good feedback going on. I appreciate you guys helping get the word out there as well. Thank you very much.
You bet.
I told you so.
Thanks, buddy.
But what are some of like maybe the lessons? Because we get so many great new perspectives from people. Is there any that stand out for you that it was just like mind blown?
Yeah, you know what I'm finding is like the further along I go and the more I'm hearing people's stories it's twofold. It's like the first thing is there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of common ground. And I think that's where that really strong connection happens with people in recovery, right? On top of that, though, there's all like the nuances as well. There's all the, like, obviously the family dynamics, it's like same but different, right? There's like some really crazy things that are just like, oh, wow, okay, that part's different. I did not go through that, right? So it's again, it's like this kind of like mixture, this duality of like really common elements, and then there's like the nuances of just the way that people's environment, the way their family dynamic was, right? So it's interesting to go through everybody's story and feel a deep connection on some things, and then just like have you did like your mind blown with some of the other wild things that some people have had to go through and live through. And like, I'm at this stage where I don't necessarily compare. It's right. I think that can be a pitfall of just anything in general in life, but especially in recovery stories about like, my story's not that bad. I just heard like this person like friggin' almost died, like Dr. Rob Kelly, his stories ridiculously crazy, almost unbelievable, but it's believable, right? Yep. It was something like that where I'm just like, holy shit, like I thought I had it's like the war stories, right? And not getting caught up in that. It's just it's not about that. It's about just what we're doing now and how everybody at the end of the day loves a comeback story, right? Sure. I had a podcast the other day, and the hero's journey and the comeback story. Those are the two, like, people love that shit, right? So like in books, movies, in real life, that kind of stuff gives me those goosebump moments, right? Where you hear of somebody that's just fall flat on their face and are just like, what do I have to do to change my life? And then something happens, they get touched in some way, or there's somebody that can help them, or they help themselves in a way they didn't think they could, and start making this comeback. And then you hear that story and it's like, it's just incredible. Like and recovery stories are, to me, as good, if not as any comeback story that you can find out there, right? Is people literally going to the brink of death, sometimes actually literally dying and coming back, right? In some of these stories, and then the ultimate hero's journey, right? Which we'll get into. It's a little bit. It's like it's the idea that your life can be different, but there's a resistance to getting through that first threshold. Then Act 2 is like really going into it, doing the self work. By Act 3. You've done all that self-work with you. You have this new found, identity, idea of who you are and your calling. And then you go back to the start again and find somebody that's about to go through their hero's journey and help them through their hero's journey. It's like the service aspect, which happens so much in the recovery community. It's like, man, I know how to do this. I want to share. It's human nature, I think, to share when you've accomplished something that's really worthwhile, like recovering from an addiction. You want to share that with people. I think that's just human nature. And so that's what a lot of this is all about too. So having a lot of people on here that are, doing work like myself, the coaches, the healers, and, and they're like, hey, I made it work for me. I'm going back to grab as many people as I can and get them through their own hero's journey and help them along the way. So it's, that's a big part of it. And that's why I said, like, I branched off into, not necessarily just people in recovery, but also the people that are at that stage where they're going back and helping, the healers, getting a little bit into like trying to broaden the scope on some of the ways to recover. Cause it's meetings worked great for me, but it's a combination of many different things. And that's why I call it a roadmap, because there's many different things that are and there's more than one way to get around your tour of duty, if you will. So that's why I'm trying to bring as many, perspectives as I can. So between like people's stories, coaches, people that run recovery clinics, other podcasters like yourself, Jay, and, as well as like even getting into something that potentially is controversial, a lot less controversial now, but like plant medicine and psychedelic therapy and such, right? Which is getting a little bit more of I understand that could be triggering for some folks, but it's in the title, right? So if it's not necessarily something for you, you could skip it, but just getting into a little bit more of a broad modern scope on the whole recovery genre, if you will. So yeah, it's been a great, journey so far. Started in April. I think about to 70 episodes, been consistently doing 2 a week, sometimes a little bit more. And yeah, it's been great. I've met so many awesome people along the way. It's like, to look back, it feels like much longer than it was, right? It's like one of these things is like, man, so I've only been going like 6-7 months or whatever it is, I guess 8 months now. But man, I've networked with just some wonderful, wonderful people. And it's just one of those things, just being open to it and allowing it to happen and putting some work in when needed, like encouraging myself to get out there and do some cold calls and such, and inviting these people in. And man, it's been quite a wonderful experience. And a final note on that, it's really put an extra level or layer of accountability on myself. Because, if I hadn't, before I had some podcasts, but this is one that it's like, I'm directly hosting as like alcohol-free Matt, right? So it's put me out there as like, it's this whole other level of accountability in my own recovery, which feels good. Honestly, at first I was like, do I want to do this? And as soon as I did, I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, I want to do that. Like, it just makes me feel stronger about my own decisions and holds me accountable. And keeps me in the game, right? It keeps me in the game, and yeah, it's just been a wonderful experience for sure.
So Matt, let me ask you, when you're talking with your folks, because I'm a firm believer in something, and one of them is, do you guys talk about the fact of when someone should start to give something back if they so desire? Because I believe that there is a time period in there from the time you get clean to the time that you should start, if that's what you desire to do, to go out and tell your story, to, for the lack of a better term, help somebody else get through this. Is there a time frame that you like to deal with, or do you just have them jump right into it?
Yeah, that's a good question. The thing that I could relate that to, I guess, is when I'm asking people, when I do some cold calls or emails or whatnot through, for the example, the Instagram community. If I'm really enjoying seeing somebody's posts and the way that they're presenting themselves, I will reach out and go, hey, are you, I really dig what you're doing. I know that you're 5 months in, they're usually pretty up to date with their counters or like their celebration days or whatnot. I go, hey, are you wanting to share your story now? And I sort of intuitively can tell. I'd like to think, anyways. For the most part, it's worked. As far as depending on how deep the share is, and if it's just kind of like that, more of a surface level, and there's nothing wrong with this, like just reposting a meme or something, like some humor. But if they're like doing a big sort of blog style post about something like super vulnerable, I'm like, okay, I think this person is at that stage where they are ready to reach their own little audience, or perhaps not even little, like their own audience, right? And so that is kind of where what I would look for, is if somebody's in there and they have like a really personal story, and it's attached to something that's like actionable. Like a lot of people are using fitness and, keeping like just really transforming their bodies and their health and their nutrition as part of their recovery. And those people are always very inspiring, right? So somebody like that, or like somebody that's even comfortable struggling a little bit in front of being like, hey, not all days, instead of showing just a highlight reel of just, man, yeah, here we go, 60. And that, again, nothing wrong with that. But just have a little bit more of a full-bodied approach where you're showing yourself at a low point too. Like, hey, I'm having a kind of a rough go of it. Yeah, I made it through day 233, but I'm not feeling it that great today. So just putting that out there, and and it comes off as like genuine versus just an attention grab or a what was me story, right? So it's sort of feeling out where the people are with that. And reaching out to them, and not everybody's comfortable, going anything beyond what their comfort zone is at that point is just putting out a blog to some folks. To get to do a person-to-person, a Zoom call or a recording can be frightening. I've been turned down more than a few times, and that's totally cool, right? Because I've got it up here, and I have kept in touch with those people, and they've been keeping in touch with me. There's a reciprocation going, hey, like, not quite ready yet. I'm still mulling over it. I know it looks like I'm sharing. I'm not quite at that stage of the game yet, right? So, yeah, I'm not sure if that entirely answers your question. That's how I've been feeling it out though so far.
Sure. Yeah, no, I've always felt that, for me, when I'm talking to somebody about sharing their experiences, if they want to talk about their story, talk about their addiction, I just believe that there's and it's different for everybody, but there's got to be a little bit of time period there that they've got some sobriety under their belt, because there's nothing worse, and I don't even want to say the word worse. There's nothing quite like, and I've seen it so many times, that somebody has they're on the bandwagon and they're all fired up, and they're out helping they're trying to help somebody, and boom, relapse. Okay. Boom, relapse, another relapse, and another one, and another one. And now this, and what that does is it sets, not that I give two shits really, but
yeah.
But the outside world's going, see, I told you so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gotcha.
See, and so when I hear that, I don't care about the outside world saying it. I feel bad for the person that did it.
I gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. Because again, Betty Ford, my last treatment center, we're all sitting around, and everybody's getting to their last day, and everybody's moving through the circle, and and all these guys want to be counselors. They want to go out and save the world, right?
Yeah,
and I'm going, are you guys nuts? I'm going, that's the last thing I want to do, and I can't tell you how many of those guys, because I kept in touch. A lot of those guys, I don't want to use the word failed, but they did not succeed at their recovery early on. And I just, again, I just think that there's got to be a time frame.
Agreed.
In there.
Yeah.
I mean, I waited 8 years before I started this organization, because in the beginning, I didn't want to do this. I was so embarrassed about what I had done. I hadn't made my amends yet. I wasn't going to blow smoke up people's asses like I normally did. And so it took me 8 years. And even then it was like, God, do I really want to do this? This is a lot of extra work here. Right. So anyway,
it's interesting. Sorry, Jay. I'm just I'm kind of curious. Like, I've never thought of it in that sense, right? You know what I mean? I've just been, I guess, so focused on, just finding if somebody has something interesting going on. I haven't necessarily processed it as you just did. So I'm just curious, like, what would you, if to flip the same question on you, as you mentioned, it's like, it's different for different people, but what would be like a safe, like a year in kind of thing before you like prove yourself to get through a calendar year? Or what would be your interpretation of that question, or answer that question?
Mine is my saying on all of this is 2 years.
2 years. Okay. It's interesting.
It's 2 years, because it's gonna take a year for that brain to heal anyway.
Totally. Yeah.
Right. It's gonna take a year for dopamine to return, serotonin to return. Your maturity is gonna start to come back. And then that the next year, again, is not that you didn't do it the first year, but that second year is really focusing, determining, seeking counsel, wise counsel, by the way, on if this is something that you want to do.
Right.
Because today we are in a society of what we're doing. Okay. Thousands of podcasts, thousands of recovery groups, thousands and thousands of all this stuff going on. Just like you brought up the thing about psychedelics. I mean, that's a whole nother podcast that I want to talk about. Okay.
Well, we got time. We can go there.
You know, I mean, and again, are we, all of us as a collective group, are we, you just mentioned something about how we're in the modern era or the modern age of recovery. What's wrong with the old age of recovery?
Nothing.
Oh yeah, nothing at all. No, absolutely.
Right.
I was actually going to say that the whatever group you're in, if it's sex and love addicts, if it's alcoholics, narcotics, money, eating, it ends with the word anonymous. And you have every right to continue to carry your anonymity as you see fit.
Right.
That is the element that you get of control and choosing and everything else. You know, it's no one else's thing to out you. It's up to you to protect that. Because if that's your boundary, then that's your freaking boundary.
Right.
That's what you've set for you. It's not our responsibility or anything else. You know, I agree with you, Flindt. Actually, there was a gentleman, former athlete, wanted to come on after sitting and having a conversation. I said, you're not ready yet. I said, because you're at the risk of sharing some things that maybe loved ones don't know yet. Or through that process, through your amends, through your own healing, is that very gung-ho, feeling better than ever. And this time is the time. You know, it's like, no, I'm sorry, you know, talking with them. There's a lot of underlying stuff there that I would be worried because he was so vulnerable with me. You'll put that out there, then all of a sudden that's out there to everyone.
Yeah.
So, sorry, I know you want to, let's revisit this next year.
Because you have, when you put yourself out there, you have to be ready to take the heat. You have to be ready to take the heat. And some people new in recovery are not going to take that well. And that could be a huge trigger for somebody. You know, you have to learn how to respond to people. You have to, you know, I mean, I had things not so much when I first, I did. When I first started this organization, there were some people going, okay, what's his game?
Sure.
What's the game behind this? He's starting a nonprofit, you know, and then even into it, you know, hey, as recent as a couple of years ago, I'd get a couple of people coming up to me going, man, how are you making a living at this? What did you do? Because man, you seem to be awfully successful at it, you know, but it was that underlying tone of, okay, what did you really do?
Right.
You know, so you have to be able to be in a position to answer that or not. Okay. But if you want to answer it, you better be ready for that question, and you better be ready with the right answer. Right.
Yeah.
And if you're new in recovery, sorry, man. I mean, that brain ain't ready yet. Yeah. That's my opinion.
Yeah. You know, Flindt. Yeah, a couple things that come up, you know, it's like, it's great. And I'm going to be honest, like, as far as I'm going to be a lot more responsible for, you know, how I'm screening some of the people. Because to me, my mindset was like, okay, you're early on in this. This is going to be a great way for you to celebrate a certain milestone early on. And perhaps this extra, you know, getting your story out there is helping you air it out and will give you some momentum moving forward. There is a flip side to that to be honest, until we're having this conversation live on air right now, I hadn't thought of it in that perspective. So I definitely appreciate your, you know, experienced take on it, first of all, to say that to me. And now definitely has the gears going as far as, you know, that's certainly not my intent, but now I'm realizing how much more responsible I can be and will choose to be moving forward. So I appreciate that. The other thing I want to circle back to, just to be clear, absolutely, I do not want to make it appear that I was saying anything bad about the old model of recovery by any means.
No. I didn't take it as that.
For myself, my big part of my story was getting into the meetings that literally saved my life. You know, I'm just more of a suggestion that's a component, and there are some other components that have worked for me. Just to be clear, and that was clearing that up for sure. But yeah, you know what? It's all great stuff. Like it's just hearing you say that though, Flindt. I appreciate that, and that's going to help me, have some more clarity with my decisions moving forward.
Sure. And, and again, it's almost like the psychedelic thing, which, I'm hearing more and more about. And on a side note, look how well it's done for Aaron Rodgers. Okay. I mean, the man goes this summer and drops some sort of psychedelic.
What did he do? Ayahuasca?
It's something, but he did it in Europe. So it's not on the NFL's list of banned substances, but it's made him an absolute wimp. And to say this about my beloved Packers is like killing me. Yeah. All right. But there's a point I'm making to this.
Yeah.
This whole people wanting to, and there's a lot of, quote, normal people dropping acid, doing this stuff to expand their mind. Look, man, what do you think you're creating something new? We did this shit back in the 60s and 70s. All right. And look where it got us. All right. It got us nowhere. All right. I mean, if you want to grow up and be Timothy Leary the rest of your life, then go for it. Right. But how does somebody talk about recovery, but it's okay to take some sort of psychedelic over here? I think we have that. And again, I could be wrong and it's just me, but my God, yes, we're living in 2022, 2023, but just because we're at this point now, do we always have to be looking for something else? Why can't we just stay with what is working and what has worked? I don't, maybe it's my age, maybe I'm an asshole. I don't know. But I don't know. Sometimes
all questionable things.
But
right.
Sometimes I just can't figure that out. So I need somebody to explain that to me, please.
Yeah, I had someone that brought up, the micro dosing, like for mushrooms and things. It might help you unlock some stuff, and I'm like,
unlock what?
Yeah, it might help me unlock. I'm an addict, and for the shit I never wanted to try. Now I've tried it, and once again, I'm like, hey, Flindt, not coming in, microdosed, and 24-pack of whatever light beer showed up, and I'm rewatching NASCAR. It's like, So for me, I agree. Like I do, it's not an area I need to go. Right. I get that for maybe some people there is some effectiveness, but what I've seen it primarily is not so much the addiction, maybe some of the other underlying symptoms of chronic depression, anxiety, etc., ADHD, whatever, so on and so forth. So, I'm informed enough to go, no, thank you for me. Right. And if you're asking my opinion, depending on the individual, I'm probably going to go, no, thank you for you either. But I'm giving my opinion.
Well, you're right. And I always go back to, and again, because I'm older, I go back to a couple instances with some friends, and there's one person in particular that I think about all the time. This guy is, he's 3 years older than I am, so he's 70. He's still alive. He was the finest musician I have ever known, had a voice like an angel. So musically talented, it's hard to even explain. And he was dropping some acid, back in 1970 and 71, and then by 72, he lost it.
Man.
And I mean, he can't remember his kids. He's been living in a garbage can, basically, at Shields and First Street. He's been hanging around in that neighborhood since 1972. His brain is fried. And is it because he took a lot? Yeah. But how do you know when you're taking any type of psychedelic when that brain is just going to go, see ya?
Yeah.
Here comes see ya again.
Well, it's different for everyone. Look at what we're seeing with youth now. I don't know about it in Canada, Matt, but I mean, now that it's legal, you can get marijuana. The THC content is off the freaking charts, insane. It's not the joint. When I smoked a joint that you went, oh, I feel
Taco Bell.
Yeah, a little goofy. I'm going to eat the whole box of tricks or whatever.
Right. Yeah,
that's right. But they're having, 14, 15, 16, because that's not only a developing brain, but everybody's different, a psychotic break that they can never come back from. Right. So for me, that again, it falls under that realm of, you don't know your brain. You don't know your genetics. You don't know it. You know, I'll guarantee you the one thing that's not going to fuck you up, abstinence.
Right.
Nobody ever got screwed up from just saying, no more pills, no more booze, not shooting anything, not snorting anything, not dropping, but nothing. Nobody ever got screwed up. It's okay to take the abstinence route. Right. I highly recommend it. For sure. It's very effective.
Right.
No, so, absolutely. Yeah. It's for sure. You know, I found it's an interesting topic for me. You know, and I have done some microdosing, you know, and I can speak from my experience. Like, so why do I do it? Well, I'm so curious about the why, right? Like, why are these feelings, these emotions, these patterns still within me? And honestly, it's given me some great insight. Like when I've had some controlled microdose before, it has opened me up. It's given me this idea of, you know, unconditional in myself and just like getting more in tune with energetically with my body. It's quieted the inner dialogue to the point where I'm focusing more on myself. It's very meditative. It had been very meditative for me, my experiences with it. So it leaned me into like just journaling about, obviously I've had a lot of, you know, growth, emotional, spiritual growth from doing it. So I can speak to it like myself for my side of it. It's been great for me for that. So I'll speak my personal experience, and honestly, like if nothing else, it gets a conversation going, right? So the people that I have had on the show are microdosing coaches or so forth. So you know, and yeah, completely understandable that it'd be a controversial topic within the realm of recovery for obvious reasons, right? Sure. But for me, for my personal stance on it, I mean, it's worked wonders for me. And you know, I like bringing it in as a conversation topic. And again, it's like, if it's not for you, it's not for you. There's going to be people that you can suggest otherwise for. There's going to be people that are just totally turn their nose up at. They're going to turn away. There'll be people that'll be curious about it, and then there's ways to you know, proceed from there. Right. So yeah, from my personal experience, though, I've had some wonderful you know, meditations for using it for that reason versus, you know, using it as like a gateway party drug or something that's going to lead me back to where I was before. If anything, it's removing me even further from my previous patterns and you know, and need for substances.
Good.
Interesting.
Good.
Yeah. No, I was going to ask that if there was the trigger element there.
Yeah, you know what? It's like I say, if anything, it's made me feel more myself and more comfortable with myself, which gets me further away from the subconscious patterns that I had been running previously. So if anything, it's got me further away from relapsing.
Well, you know, I mean, it's almost, there's a great line in that show, West Wing. Do you guys ever watch West Wing?
I'm familiar with the show, never watched it.
Same.
God, I just, the writing in that thing is just amazing. And there's an opening scene. It might even be in the first episode. And one of the guys that the Rob Lowe, he plays this part of the president's advisor, and he meets this girl and they go home together, and she lights up a joint as he's getting in the shower to go home. And she says, you know, she goes, I'm not a drug addict. She goes, I just love getting high. And Rob Lowe, without missing a beat, turns to her and goes, yeah, and I bet you're cataract free too. You know? So my point there is, you know, there are some medicinal purposes, you know, sure, to certain substances.
Right.
And I guess there's a level of hypocrisy. I've talked about it openly here. Both of you know I do take medication for my depression. Sure. So a prescribed medication that's evaluated by a doctor, regular checkups, blood work, etc. Right. So
sure.
I guess there's a way to evaluate that. And maybe people go, you're being hypocritical, which I'll take some of that for sure and go, okay,
sure.
You know, I could see a perspective to argument if you want to nail me to the wall. And I'm not trying to nail anyone to the wall. I'm saying for me, I know me. I know where it would go.
Right.
It would be me calling in sick because the 24 pack of light beer showed up, and I'm rewatching the Formula One and NASCAR race from the weekend. I just know that about myself.
You've seen that movie before.
This is my recovery. I know it.
Exactly.
Rigorous honesty.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Matt, if people want to find out more about you, all the work you're doing with Recovery Roadmap, and we get involved, join the coaching, your one-on-one as well as the group stuff and the podcast, how can they find you?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Really appreciate the time today. It's been a great conversation. Loved it.
Yeah.
So recoveryroadmap.me, that's my website. Also my Instagram handle. I'm on Instagram a fair bit. So if you ever want to DM me, I am on there a few times a day. So that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. I also have a YouTube channel. It's Matt Gardiner Live. So that has my sound therapy compositions as well as all my interviews that I do. And yeah, as you mentioned, my podcast is called Beyond Recovery. And that is pretty self-explanatory. It's just an addiction recovery podcast. So, and yes, Flindt was on. I believe he was the last guest. So I think it was maybe a couple guests to go within the last week or so. So if you want to hear the tables being turned and me questioning Flindt, it was a wonderful interview. So definitely check it out. I'd love to have you on there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful conversation. Boy, we didn't even get into, breathwork sound therapy stuff. So, hey, put a pin in that.
Yep.
Topics to discuss another time. Mr.
Absolutely.
Andersen.
Matt, thank you. You're the best, buddy. I mean, I'm not kidding. You know what? This
Appreciate
is a joy. I'm so glad Jason hooked us up. This is good conversation. This is good stuff. And keep up the good work, my friend. You're doing amazing stuff.
Thank you, guys, and reciprocate it back to you. Wonderful stuff you guys are doing. Really, very inspiring. And I'm so fortunate to have met you both.
If you or a loved one is struggling with addiction, please call Parents and Addicts in Need at 559-579-1551 or check us out online at painnonprofit.org. Follow us on social media at Pain Nonprofit. Please subscribe to the podcast and share with others wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. To donate, please click the link in the description and help us save more lives gripped by addiction.
This podcast contains the views and opinions of hosts and their guests to the show. The content here should not be taken as medical advice. The content here is for informational purposes only. And because each person is sharing their unique perspective, please consult your healthcare professional for any medical questions. Views and opinions expressed in the podcast and website are our own and do not represent that of our places of work. While we make every effort to ensure that the information we are sharing is accurate, we welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. Privacy is of the utmost importance to us. For those wishing anonymity, people, places, and scenarios mentioned in the podcast have been changed to protect confidentiality at the request of certain guests. This website or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or website. In no way does listening, reading, emailing, or interacting on social media with our content establish a doctor-patient relationship. If you find any errors in any of the content of this podcast or blogs, please send a message through the contact page.